NCERT's controversial cuts. Selective or objective revision. Row over deleted syllabus reignites. Big fat row over thinning textbooks. All references to Mughals purged from 7th class textbooks, while chapters on Mahakumbh and Indian dynasties included. Included also chapters on government initiative like Beti Bachao. While NCERT had previously trimmed sections on the Mughal and Delhi Sultanate, including detailed account of dynasties like Tughlaqs, Khiljis, Mamluks and Lodhis, and a 2-page table on Mughal emperors' achievements. As part of its syllabus rationalization, citing trimming syllabus due to COVID-19 pandemic. However, the new textbooks have now removed all references to them entirely, and we're in no pandemic anymore. The politics of textbook revision. Young minds to be taught balanced history. Top focus and to the point this evening. All right, so viewers, what's really happened is that the NCERT has removed all references, mind you, all references to Mughals from the 7th standard textbooks. Now, multiple questions are being raised at the back of that, and let's ask those questions this evening. Now, NCERT's Mughal cuts, subjective or objective revision. I'll take you back. I'll hark you back at the time of the pandemic. At that point of time, the NCERT had taken away a bit of the syllabus of various standards then, be it the 7th or even the 9th class. And they had made a lot of cuts where Mughal history was concerned. At that point of time, they had said that we are making these cuts because we need to reduce the syllabus of students because they would be able to study it during the times of COVID. This time around, they have deleted all references to Mughals and we are in no pandemic. The other question that we asked, should young minds be taught balanced history? Because that seemingly is one argument, that we need to balance the history in favor of what is our heritage. And we need to put that in. But should that be the aim of teaching history to young minds? And the last and final question we ask, will omitting chapters omit how history unfolded? And I would reckon, viewers, that is the biggest question. You can take Mughals out of textbooks where it comes down to students here of the 7th class, but can you actually take out Mughals and their role in India's history? I'm going to try and get 2 points of views on that. Dr. Ruchika Sharma, historian, academic, specializing in medieval Indian history, particularly Mughal history. She's written books on it. I also have Dr. Pranay Agarwal, who is an educationalist. I want to cut across to Dr. Ruchika Sharma first. Dr. Ruchika Sharma, the 7th class students now will have absolutely no knowledge on what or who Mughals were, because at least what we've been given to believe with the latest revision, which the NCERT says is very objective revision, young minds need to know more about our own history, our Indian dynasties, and less about Mughals. So all references to Mughals have been taken away where 7th class is concerned. The argument is if kids want to study history later on, they can take it in their higher grades and actually deep dive into what India's history is. But in the formative years, kids need to learn about their own culture and their own leaders and their own kings and their own dynasties.
Well, I think it's a very dishonest and ahistorical argument to make, because somehow Mughals and Delhi Sultanates do not form the Indian culture. In fact, it's actually very imperative that the kids know about Mughals, especially because they have 300 years of history which is very close to us in time, rather than to the history of the Cholas and Shungas, who are in time farther away. Secondly, if you look at what we eat today, what we wear today, how we speak for most of North India, for example, is everything of that had genesis under the Mughal rule. So the language that we speak today, called Hindi Urdu, came from Zabani-Hindvi, which started during the Mughal rule. The clothes that we wear today, say for example the kurta, say for example the churidar, right? These are very common clothes. The lehenga choli. All of this, when is it coming? It's coming under the Mughal rule, right? The food that we eat today, for example, is a very common thing that a lot of Indian homes have, which is called as the do piazza, which is where you first put piyaz in the tadka and then you put piyaz over it. That, again, comes with the Mughalite cuisine. Right? So you cannot say that the Mughals are not related to the Indian culture. And it's a very dishonest and unfair argument to make, considering most of the sites in India today that give the maximum amount of money to the Indian government with tourism are actually buildings which are built by the Mughals. Right? So Mughals have a huge role to play in our present, and therefore removing them from the past is absolutely unfair to the Mughal history, but more than that, unfair to the children who really need to know that where does a lot of their culture come from, where does the language that they speak, the clothes they wear, the food that they eat come from, right? The other important thing, it's actually very sad that usually the way the syllabus was divided was in class 6 you would have quote-unquote ancient India, in class 7 you would have quote-unquote medieval India, and in class 8 you would have quote-unquote modern India. Now in class 7, you have retained medieval India, but you've actually taken out 600-700 years of medieval India out of that, which is the Delhi Sultan, right? For example, Alauddin Khalji's massive contribution in thwarting 7 Mongol invasions. Not one, not two. That man thwarted 7 Mongol invasions. Had he not done that, the entire trajectory of Indian history could have been completely changed. So removing that man from the 7th class textbook is actually very unfair to Indian history, right? So I think the corollary of the two is basically this idea that somehow they are foreign and therefore they don't need to be included is actually doing injustice to Indian history, because they are, at the end of the day, the Mughals and Delhi Sultans collectively put together 1,000 years of Indian history. You cannot remove 1,000 years of Indian history from class 7 textbooks. I would also like to mention, since, there is a lot of brouhaha made about Mughals and, only Mughals being deleted, only Delhi Sultans being deleted. There is plenty of other injustice happening in the class 7 textbooks as well. They've removed, they've described the Varna Jati system as something that takes rigidity under the English and initially comes across only to give societal stability. Now, I think that erases the struggle of the Dalits. Who have around 2,500 to 3,000
Dr.
years
Sharma,
of history.
allow me to come back to you. I want to introduce our other guests. Allow me to come back to you. And I want to bring in Dr. Pranay Agarwal. Because, what also Dr. Sharma just, touched on is it's not just Mughal history, viewers. There are chapters of protest in India that have been taken out. So I would think young kids would not even know what the Chipko movement was all about, because most chapters when it comes down to protest have also been removed along with Mughal history. So I want to go to Dr. Pranay Agarwal, who's actually of the opinion that it's a great thing. But Dr. Agarwal, away from the rhetoric of it all, that, we need to focus on Indian dynasties. Why did we over-amplify the Mughals in our culture? The fact, Dr. Agarwal, I'm sure you're an educationist and you know, is that the Mughals did play a huge role where medieval history is concerned. What one really fails to understand is, how will children learn about medieval history? Because that is what the 7th standard was supposedly the subject of medieval history, where you're not even talking to them about the Mughals.
Preeti, I'll begin with the observation, with the cliche that education makes a man. So whatever I am today in large measure is due to my education, and I think I speak for each one of us when I say that. Coming specifically to the changes in the NCERT textbooks, I would say it is a very welcome development, but it is, the way I see it, it is too little too late. In fact, much more needs to be done. Our history textbooks, they are infamously distorted and partial, I would say. So, while it's a glad departure from the days of Prakash Javadekar, who in 2018 had said, I have not changed even a comma as the education minister. But I hope that this time these changes are taken to its logical conclusion. You see, there are many conspicuous omissions in our history textbooks particularly. So I hope the project of broadening and making Indian history more inclusive and, should I say, more complete is done till the end. For example, much of Indian history is Delhi-centric, right? So we are taught in great detail about even obscure Delhi-based dynasties like the Lodhis. But we know very little from our official, the history we are taught about the Vijayanagar Empire or the Satavahanas or the Ahoms of Assam, right? These very great dynasties, they are literally reduced to a footnote in our history textbooks. Similarly, you see, because of the Delhi emphasis, land-based invasions we know a lot about, but maritime history of India is, should I say, somewhat downplayed. And with our long coastline, our engagement with the rest of the world has been through, for example, with Southeast Asia, has been through the oceanic route, which is somewhat, I would say, ignored. So, and another thing is that I hope that these revisions are not reversed because of criticism from the left, which dominates Indian academic spaces and Indian civil society as well. Also, Preeti, now why these revisions were important? Firstly, to correct historical imbalances, I would say. So, since independence, literally, Indian history textbooks did not pay adequate attention to glorious indigenous dynasties, right? And that is what is now being rectified. So, we are trying to restore the balance by giving due importance to India's own civilizational achievements. When you are highlighting the Magadh or the Mauryas or the sacred pilgrimage sites, you are showcasing the cultural and the spiritual heritage of India, right? So it instills a sense of pride in India's timeless civilizational existence. Also, it helps to promote a rooted national identity. Children first should understand their own country's ancient cultural and political evolution before learning about foreign rulers. So these changes that are being done in the NCERTs, I would say they will help to build a rooted and confident Indian society, which is essential if we are to come up as a rising power on the global stage. Okay. Right? Another thing is that, when you're talking about the sacred geography, which is being accused of saffronization and whatnot, I would say when you're talking about the Char Dham Yatra or the Jyotirlings in our textbooks, you are emphasizing the spiritual geography and how it unites us. For example, the linguistic, the whole divide over Hindi imposition, etc. There are far more, what should I say, fundamental aspects which unite us. One of which is the sacred geography. Okay. So that national integration can be fostered through how we teach our history to our children.
All right. I'm going to give either of you 1.5 minutes each because that's all the time that I have. But I want to cut across to Dr. Sharma first before I go back to Dr. Agarwal to put their point of view. Dr. Sharma, you heard the submissions of Dr. Agarwal. What do you make of them?
First of all, I don't know which school did Dr. Agarwal go to because I clearly remember reading about the Vijayanagars, a separate chapter about the Vijayanagars in class 7 itself. There is absolutely no argument to make that Vijayanagar is something that is not taught to us. Secondly, this idea that we should not be teaching our kids foreign rule. Well, then all of Indian history is a history of foreign rule, starting with the Aryans, which come from the Central Asian steppes, and this is something that has been proven beyond a doubt. Even the NCERT carries the two genetic studies which say that the Aryans migrated from 1500 BCE onwards. So are we to not teach our kids any history at all, considering all of Indian history comes from a tribe, starting with the Aryans? Are we only to teach them, for example, the Indus Valley civilization that many would also argue are sites now in quote-unquote Pakistan? So if you are going to use the national territory, which was put in the 20th, 21st century on India, and map that onto history, then I think that would be very problematic because then it takes away all of Indian history, right? Because entire Indian history, including the Satavahanas, including the Mauryas, including the Kushans, they've all come from outside, right? So let's not say that this is something that is foreign rule, and which is why. Last point, I think very good point made about maritime. I would say please teach them about maritime history, starting with the 7th century, where the Arabs actually started controlling most of the maritime history of India. There is a fantastic mosque built in the 11th century by a Jain merchant called Jagru Shah in Bhadreshwar.
So basically you're seeming to suggest we need to have the Mughal history exactly where it was because it's important that our kids learn what the role of the Mughals were to shape where we stand today.
Absolutely. And to say that, this is something that is foreign, well, then the entire history of India is foreign to us.
I'd like to give 1.5 minutes to Dr. Agarwal to give in his submissions. You heard Dr. Sharma. Go ahead, Dr. Agarwal.
So I'm afraid that Dr. Sharma had misquoted or misunderstood some of what I had said. Nowhere had I suggested that the Satavahanas, etc. are not mentioned in our history textbooks, but there is a relative imbalance in the kind of importance different dynasties have been given, which needs to be rectified. That was my point. Secondly, Dr. Sharma misquoted me again when she said that I had suggested that foreign rule should not be taught. Absolutely not. I would never make such a suggestion. What I am suggesting is that, which nation in the world does not teach about its own civilizational achievements to its children? Whether you look at France, it teaches about the Gauls and the Franks, and China teaches about the Qin and the Han dynasties. So why should we shy away from teaching about our golden periods like Guptas or Mauryas? That is the point, right? And it is nobody's case that Mughal history should be deleted in entirety. Of course, it needs to be retained, right? So, and let me clarify, the way I see it, Muslim history is not being erased. Muslims remain an integral part of India. Muslim history remains an integral part of our history, right? So what is happening is a project of completion and expansion of our textbooks by including the other dynasties and giving them sufficient space. Please appreciate India's civilizational history is 5,000 plus years old. It is not confined to the period of the Delhi Sultanate or Mughal rule. So we need to make our history textbooks more inclusive.
Okay.
Right?
All right. I appreciate both points of view. Thank you, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Agarwal, for joining us. We're going to let it be, but it's a story we're going to follow very, very closely, because there have not been multiple cuts. Because if it is medieval histories, what we're looking at in 7th standard is the initiation of young minds to know what India's medieval history is. When India's medieval history, viewers, is about the Mughals, and they will learn nothing about the Mughals, at least is what we've been given to understand in their first textbook right now.